You're listening to The Dope Experience with Romby Bryant, Javier Collins, and Sal Vergara. Our conversations revolve around people looking to evolve and transform into the next phase of their lives. We're here to help them navigate this journey by developing one's perspective every day. Welcome back to The Dope Experience. I'm Sal Vergara here with Romby Bryant and Javier Collins, where we develop one's perspective every day. We've got a great show lined up with our special guest, Fanny Dunagan. And Fanny and I met a couple years ago at an event amongst some mutual industry friends. Fanny is the CEO and co-founder of Pathlinks, which is a consulting firm that helps business owners and professionals create social media content and then the video strategies and plans behind that. A lot of times folks often overlook the strategic nature of creating solid content and the associated approach to distributing that content. And that's where Fanny helps out many clients in many different industries. Before Pathlinks, Fanny had a successful corporate consulting career in change management consulting, in IT implementation in the aerospace defense industry. That's pretty interesting. Hopefully we'll get into that a little bit later. But most recently, Fanny was a guest of mine in my HRQ and Transformation Network session, where she walked folks through how to leverage video in establishing and cultivating a solid personal brand. She's inspired me. She's advised me on how to do things, and it's helped me tremendously. So we appreciate Fanny's presence and her expertise today. Fanny, how are you doing amidst all this craziness?
Oh, I'm doing good. Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show, everyone. I so appreciate it. No, things are good because all eyes are online now. Right. So it's more and more important to have an online brand because we communicate digitally and virtually now. And I'm looking forward to getting into that with everyone.
You're a busy woman. We just saw you recently on Michael Goldberg's show earlier today, Hiring Transformed, right? That's
yes.
His show.
That's an important thing to do. Like, I think for anyone and everyone, really get yourself out there and say yes to opportunities, find opportunities to share your voice. And that's all part of building your brand online and being known for a certain expertise.
Sure.
Yeah. Transitioning for football, I opened my own farmers insurance agency. And I realized real fast you have to build your own brand to get out there because, insurance, everybody needs insurance, but it's the necessary evil. And what makes you different than the next person? And it's usually that brand, your personal brand plays a big part in that. And I would say former players should utilize their brand now while they're playing to help set themselves up for post-football career. Their post-football career, because we don't do that. Me, when I was playing football, or most football players, we just worried about winning that championship trophy,
right?
And then we didn't care about our brand off the field. We only care about our brand on the field.
Yeah,
what we're doing on the field.
Yeah,
that's a very good point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Robbie. It's in many cases that beginning for that transition starts. Well, I learned that the day that you prepare for leaving the NFL is the day that you get to the NFL. Mm-hmm. And I really like your approach, Fanny, and how, well, your approach to creating video content, but also your cadence. I mean, you're putting out content yourself and doing videos pretty frequently. I've caught a couple of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll get into it, but just noticing that and noticing how impactful just having you, seeing Fanny Dunagan is doing a live video, like that comes up on my feed. So that message in of itself is an important branding message, I would imagine, right?
Yes. For the longest time, I think just based on my background, I used to be a nerdy engineer and watch Star Trek and ate mac and cheese in college, but and I was always the quiet one, and I was always looking for approval and just saying yes to things when I might not have felt it. And over the course of my career, I've realized that I have something worthy to say. And I realized that I really wanted to serve others. And I really felt the need to empower others to share their voice. So along my content creation journey, I think that's what I found as my motivation. And so now I'm on this mission to empower others to share their voice and share their gifts with the world, especially through video. I think video, short of meeting somebody face to face, I think video really helps people get to know that person. And there's so much more to a person than just their words, right? There's their body language. And I always say, like, a picture's worth 1,000 words, but a video's worth 1,000,000 words. And you can get a big sense of a person. And I think the more consistent content you create, even if somebody hasn't met you, they're going to start to feel like they know you before they even meet you. And that's going to get you a foot up. And that potential person will end up being a warm lead instead of like a cold lead by the time they reach out to you. So those are some of my motivations, and we'll get into some more details later, but I think that's where it all comes from.
Well, to your point, Fanny, and you said something earlier on the previous show with our friend Michael Goldberg. You said, do it scared,
Yes.
And even when you and I first met about creating content, and this is a big step, just doing this on video and then podcasting. This is a big for me to get out of my comfort level as well. But we know that creating content, specifically in this case, video, has always been important. But now that COVID, in the COVID landscape, it seems even more critical to be able to convey your message much more effectively and to optimize the way your personal brand is disseminated. You've designed a very strategic approach to develop one's personal brand. And you've actually presented this at my Transformation Network session. The expertise, the value, strengths, and interest framework is powerful. Can you elaborate on that and how you came up with that concept?
Absolutely. Like I said, I like to study things before I tackle it. So for the longest time, I was just studying how other people created content. And I looked at why some people were naturally attracting people to them and audiences to them, and why other content wasn't working. And after studying things for I didn't post anything for probably a good half year. I just watched other people. And after doing that, I realized that there's a certain pattern that emerged, right? A lot of times people just go out and talk about their business services, right? Whether it's finance or HR or IT, whatever it is their services are or their expertise are. But what made those influencers stand out and what made them connect with their audience is that they also shared a part of themselves. And then I started to analyze that even further. And I asked myself, okay, how did they share themselves? Like, what is it about them that they brought to the surface along with what they were sharing? And I realized it was their values. Their values came out. And then along the way, I also discovered a great assessment tool called the Gallup Strengths Finder. And so then I incorporated that into the brand. And then finally, people's interests. They would talk about something entertaining or their hobbies. So that eventually led me to these 4 quadrants and the 4 parts of this framework. So the first one is, like you said, expertise, right? That's our business knowledge. That's our service that we're selling or product that we're selling, or on our resume, it's like our key skills and experience, right? That's the business side of it. The second part of it is our values. That's the V in the framework, right? What are your values? Do you believe in empathy? Do you believe in positivity, creating trust? Do you believe in competition, creativity, and all these different factors, right? So ask yourself, what are your values? Every company has values, and every person should have values. The third part is our strengths, and that's the Gallup Strengths Finder report. So if you Google Gallup Strengths, you're going to come across this great assessment. It's a $20 assessment, and you answer a bunch of questions, and it's going to tell you your strengths. And the strengths are really critical because what it tells you is even when you're grumpy and tired and like super anxious, right? Your strengths are you're still going to be naturally good at them, right? So you're going to find out your top 5 strengths. And then from there, your interests, right? What are your hobbies? What sports do you like? What do you do on the weekends? Is it travel? Is it music? Whatever, right? So you have these 4 components. So I want you to like picture 4 boxes, basically. Your expertise, your values, your strengths, and your interests. And list down 3 things for each of those. And from there, you marry all 4 of them, right? So I'm going to give you a quick example. So my expertise might be content creation, right? So I give a lot of content tips, right? That's from the first quadrant. My values is around creating trust, right? And authenticity. So whenever I can, I talk about trust and being authentic and being vulnerable in front of audiences, right? So I use those kind of words in my messages. And then thirdly, one of my strengths is connectedness that came out of the assessment, right? I instantly connect the dots to things. I connect people to people, services to services. So I'm always introducing others to each other, right? And then interests. My interest is travel, right? So then I weave in little travel videos sometimes into my content. Right? So I would encourage everyone in your audience here, ask yourself those 4 areas, right? Even like, let's say Rambi or Javier, right? From what little I know of you guys, one of your expertise is leadership development, right? So that's your expertise. And then I would ask you, what's a value that you both have, or Sal even? Like name one value that you respect.
Courage.
Courage. Okay.
Honesty.
Honesty. Yeah. Rambi?
Integrity.
There you go. Okay. So those are values. And then strengths. Have you guys done Gallup Strengths Finder assessment yet? What was one of your top strengths?
Harmonize. I think harmonizing or something like that.
Oh,
Harmony.
yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Relator.
Relator. Oh, yes. Yes.
Same for me.
Okay.
Another strength is identifying different colors that normally other people aren't aware of.
Yeah. Okay. And then what's one interest that you all have?
That was a joke that went over.
No.
By the way, Sal likes fuchsia.
That joke hit me in the face. What you see? So you see colors, huh?
Yes, sir.
I can tell you one interest that we don't agree on is Texas A&M, but
I told you, Fanny. There had to be an Aggie joke in here somewhere.
Okay.
No, but one interest, leadership. I mean,
no, as in a hobby, like something you do.
Oh,
on the
hobby.
Mm-hmm.
I love guns. I mean, I don't know
Okay.
if that's something you put out there.
Okay. And then football, right?
Football, yeah. Obviously
That's obvious.
football.
Yeah. So let's take, okay, so I'll just pick from some of that, right? So in one post or in one article, you might have some leadership advice, maybe 5 key leadership qualities that you've found across your career, right? Let's say you're writing an article, right? So you're talking about your expertise, which is leadership. And then I think, Javier, one of the things you talked about was courage, right? That's your values. So I would reinforce that point in that article, right? How leaders have to be courageous, right? So over time, people can associate the word courage with you because you always bring it up in your content, right? And then your strength of relator, right? So then you might incorporate the fact that leaders need to relate to their team or relate to their audience and so forth, right? So again, it's another word that you should tie to your brand and tie to your what people know you for, right? But then you might build in some analogies around football, or if it's guns, then maybe like the attention to detail, the attention to how you clean it, or how maybe how you line up a shot, and that you can tie that to how leaders need to set a goal or something, right? So suddenly your article or your piece of content is very specific to you. It's not just another so-called like generic leadership article. It's an article that relates to your values of courage, relatedness, and then you throw in a little entertaining piece or a story around football or guns, right? And that's how you create a piece of content. That's a small example of how you marry all sides of you. And then suddenly this article became this very interesting article that's specific to you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It does.
And that's how you create a unique brand, because there's no one else that's going to combine those four things together, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's why this quadrant is so important.
Yeah. So when I told you when I got out of football, Farmers Insurance was the first thing I got into.
Yeah.
And I hired somebody to help me build my business. And one of the things they told me when it comes to building your brand is your social media presence.
Yeah.
And you mentioned values and interests, and some people relate their values and interests within politics and religion. And that's one thing they said, stay away from that. So how do you feel about building your brand and including politics and religion within your values and interests? Would you say do it or not do it, and why?
Good question.
Yeah.
Good question.
For me personally, I don't get into that. But I think values is so much more than that, right? That actually came up in the show that I did this morning. And when you if you were to Google list of values, right? You're going to come up with a list of everything from, you could have a value of competition, of empathy, of creativity, of innovation, of, grace, of giving, of trust, of honesty. So there's so many values out there that you could talk about that's universal, right? And for me, I think when you talk about truth like that, and when you talk about everlasting values like that, you end up connecting to your audience a lot more. So you might because every company has values, right? You might take those values, pick out a few that resonate with you, with your own personal values and your own brand, and then start weaving those together, right? So the company that I support in recruitment, one of their values is entrepreneurship, right? So we're always trying to hire consultants that have a spirit of entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship is also something that I'm very passionate about because I'm an entrepreneur myself. I have my own company, right? So suddenly this theme of entrepreneurship permeates my corporate client's brand and my employer's brand. Plus, it's it ties into my personal brand. So it's a matter of finding that parallel and then concentrating on that and doubling down on that. And that way you're going to attract audiences to you that love entrepreneurship, right? And you want that kind of tribe. You want that kind of audience. You want that kind of vibe. And so always find the connection between what you value, what your company values, marry that together. And then that's how you kind of marry the two brands together. Does that help?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And good segue to my question, and is how can someone create a personal brand while keeping it congruent with your employer or your company's brand?
Yeah. Because I'll give you another example. So the corporate client that I support is in the aerospace and defense industry, right? Sal, you mentioned that's my past, right? And so I'm fascinated by planes, right? So that's a interest, right? Airplanes and travel, right? So that's a personal interest. But because the employer is in the aerospace and defense industry, sometimes I post travel photos and airplane updates, or even fascinating things happening at airports. Granted, everything's a little crazy right now with COVID, but and at the same time, I'm going to attract audiences that like planes and travel as well. And that's something that we always hire for for my corporate client, because we want road warriors, right? We want people that like to accumulate points and like fly and don't mind flying every Monday to Thursday for their work, right? Because they're consultants, right? So suddenly I took my interests, personal brand around flying and airplanes, and tied it into the industry that my employer is in, aerospace and defense. And that becomes content that will attract a like-minded audience and a like-minded potential client or someone that we want to hire as well. So always find the parallels and always connect the dots and then double down on that.
Have you ever in your past with any of your clients where someone's personal brand just didn't mesh with their corporate brand, and how do you reconcile that? Because
that's when I tell them to get out.
That compromises their ability to continue working at that said company. So who what gives? Who gives up?
Yeah. Honestly, the more you create content, the more you're going to find your truth, because you can't lie and you can't hide, and people will always sense when you're not authentic, and people will always sense, and you will sense when you're not authentic. Because when you're on, right, when you're putting out a video, especially if it's live, you're going to words are going to start coming out of you. And you're going to realize, man, that sounded awful. Or man, that doesn't sound true at all. Like, what am I saying? Right? And so I think when you create content, you're going to come to a point where you really discover your voice and you really figure out what kind of person you want to be and what kind of impact you want to have. And if it doesn't gel with the company, you probably knew that already. And I think you're going to find a place where it's not going to match. You can still find areas where it's common. Let's say I'm a marketing professional and I'm a marketing manager at a company, right? You can still talk around marketing and give tips and advice around that. But, if your values don't match up, then I would honestly avoid that.
Absolutely. No, this is really, really good feedback and information that you're sharing with us. And I really thank you for coming on here and sharing this with us. It's been helpful for me. And I really, as I mentioned before, I admire your hustle. I admire your grind. As I mentioned, every time I'm on LinkedIn, you're Fanny Dunagan is on LinkedIn doing something live, right? I get that prompt that comes up. So that's just, you are doing what you are saying. So that's awesome. I'm interested just in you share with us your kind of how you got into it, being such a introspective, if you will. You use the word quiet, but
yeah.
I relate that to being very introspective or even reserved. So I'm just curious at what point, like when you were in that study mode and you were just researching and absorbing all you could from the masters at the time.
Yeah.
At what point did you decide, or what was it that made you decide that it was ready? It was time for you to make that leap for yourself.
Honestly, it was driven by fear.
Okay.
At the time, I was organizing job fairs. And so our company would work together with the Chamber of Commerce in our local community. And we would try to get employers and job seekers to our job fair events. And that's why I'm so passionate about career development and people in transition as well. But when you marry these two sides, when I'm trying to promote to the two sides, I ended up having to find like a unique language, right? And, with employers, I had to speak to, hiring practices, and with job seekers, we had to speak to job search tips, right? And we had all this money down on this venue. And so I was freaking out that people weren't going to come to the event. And at the time, Facebook and LinkedIn were both pushing video very heavily. And so I was like, crap, nobody's going to come to this event if we don't get on video. And so I did it. Like because we tried all kinds of other ways, like flyers and image posts and text posts, but none of it was getting nearly enough engagement as video. So one day in front of the venue, I pulled out my smartphone and recorded the video talking about our event. And because the Facebook and LinkedIn algorithm really favored video, it got tons of views and it just ballooned from there. And honestly, like that thrill of like your heart pumping and you're scared out of your mind. And at the same time, like remembering that these events are there to serve job seekers and serve our community. So it became this thrill. And so it came out of necessity, honestly. And then from there, I just started this series called #JobSearchStories, where I would interview a bunch of career resources and resume writers and career coaches. And that got a lot of engagement as well. And then it just went from there. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So what is the, in terms of output, I kind of was tongue in cheek, but you have some pretty good output. Is there like as far as a recommendation, someone who, to Romby's question, someone who wants to develop their own personal brand, but may have some corporate concerns or may have some constraints there, right. Or someone who may not have those kind of constraints, but maybe hindered by something else. What is like a target number or a target number of video posts a week or a month that someone can realistically shoot for to still be effective?
Yeah. I would say at least once a day, not one video a day, but at least post once a day. I always tell people like have your most pivotal, important posts on Mondays, especially on LinkedIn, and have that because you post it on Monday, that's your most important piece, and it has the whole week for people to watch it, right? And then on Tuesday, you might post an article that ties into that. And you don't even have to be the one to write the article. You might have found it on Forbes or New York Times or whatever magazine or platform to justify or to supplement what you talked about on Monday. And then Wednesday, you might have an image that you post, right? And Thursday, you might have another video or you might have a text post. And then I always tell people to finish off Friday with something more lighthearted, right? Or an inspirational quote. Right? So that way, every week you can have a certain theme. And then on the Mondays is your critical piece. And then the rest of the days, it can supplement your theme or your main piece on Monday. And even for like long form, right? If you have an interview or if you have a podcast like this, right? You take the whole 60 minutes and then you cut out little important pieces out of it. And then that can be social media content. And you can do like, maybe you have a funny part of the podcast and that part can go into Instagram, and then a more serious business oriented piece of the podcast could go into LinkedIn, and then something else can go into Facebook. And so like cater your audience and your social media content to that platform. And that way, one piece of content, a 60-minute podcast, let's say, can be chopped up and can be positioned in all these different other platforms. And suddenly you only create one time 60 minutes, and then you get an editor to cut it up and then post it on all these different platforms. I learned that from Gary Vaynerchuk, for those of you that follow him, right? Yeah.
This is explicitly why we wanted to have you on here, because a lot of folks who just create content don't think about how one 60-minute segment has so many different facets of marketing, and then it can go to certain platforms. You know, LinkedIn is very different from Facebook. It's very different from Twitter. It's very different from Instagram. And going along these lines, you know, the essence of this show is focused on the transformation of folks, you know, be it former athlete into civilian life or a professional moving into another professional role. For those that are reluctant, I asked you this before, so it's sort of a setup already, but for those that are reluctant to do a video, especially who are in transformation, you know, in this case, at the event that you spoke with us, for executives who are in transformation, bless you. We're very, very cognizant of being polite here on this show. What do you advise folks who are just so reluctant or scared? And I'd mentioned at the top of the hour, do it scared. And I love that hashtag, do it scared. What should be that first content, and how long should that be? And I know it may be different for a lot of folks, but I'm very verbose, obviously, but from a video content perspective, what is the optimal piece for that first time?
So I would first ask yourself, what type of medium do you feel most comfortable in? Right? Nobody says you have to start with video, right? If you like to write, then write an article. And even for writing, you could do short form or long form, right? On short form is Twitter, right? Long form is maybe a LinkedIn article or a blog, right? Or if you're better talking, but you're more auditory than visual, then do a voice memo on your iPhone or a smartphone, right? And then the audio can become a piece of content, and you overlay an image. Maybe you're more creative and you like things in diagrams and graphics. So create a diagram or graphic to illustrate your point, right? So first, choose the medium that you're most comfortable communicating through, right? So that takes care of a certain level of comfort, right? And then from there, I always tell people to, if you're not certain about what to talk about and what your expertise is, sit down and list down the top 10 questions you always get asked. Right? What do people seek your advice on? What do your friends always ask you? What do your colleagues always ask you? What do your clients always ask you? And sit down and write down the top 10 questions you always get asked. Because if you're getting asked that, then that means people are seeking out your advice and your knowledge around that area. Right? That's what you're known for right now. And then come up with the 10 answers to those 10 questions. And suddenly you have 10 pieces of content. Right? I always remind people, especially on LinkedIn, it's all about the problems you solve. So if you can formulate content in the form of a problem or question, and then your answer and your solution to it in like 2-3 minute segments, right? Then you're on your way to creating content that matters to you and content that matters to your audience. Okay? So I would start there, because if that's where your comfort level is, right? People are coming to you for advice around something, right? So that's where your comfort level is. Then you choose that medium that you're comfortable in and just start there. And that will ease a lot of the fear. And then do it even though your heart's pounding.
Most important.
I just thought of this question. So, you know, we live in the cancel culture right now where people are being shamed, businesses are being shamed. So say one of your clients or somebody that got fired for something they did because they felt like they were doing something that was part of their personal brand, and they got shamed and canceled for that. How would you work with that client on rebuilding their brand?
Were they shamed because they were speaking their truth, or were they shamed? They were, right? So let's go with that, right? Yeah. So one type of video that always really works is sharing a story, right? And I think the best stories are the ones where you highlight a vulnerability, you highlight a challenge, and then how you overcome that, right? I call that the, Javier, we talked about this a while back, right? It's the hero's journey, right? It's the basis of every movie, every script, right? So I would say just take out your phone and look into it. It's not live, and share your story. Share that you had this incident, right? And what your truth is, what your value is, and then what your next step is, how you're going to overcome that, or how you're going to set a new goal or a new ambition or a new thing to strive for, and record that. And whether you post it or not, I think that's very empowering. Like when we tell our stories, especially when we come from a place of pain and challenge, and then how we overcame that and the lesson that came from that. And I would start with that story and post it on Instagram or Facebook, and just swallow that big knot in our throat and share it. And you'd be surprised, even if you never post it, just by recording it and watching it back and seeing your own courage and seeing your own authenticity, I think that will spur us and spur that client to take the next step, and look forward and go after that new goal. I don't know if that answers it, but
no, it does.
That's what I would do with that. If that client came to me, is I would have them share their story.
What do you see the future of video content creation, and what does that look like, or the platforms that we use and how we approach it?
I honestly think that it's time to speak up. Whatever it is that the time for remaining quiet won't serve us anymore, right? Even from a hiring perspective, people send me their resumes and I would review them, but I also look onto their LinkedIn profiles and I check to see like what kind of articles they share, what kind of comments that they put on, and I ask myself, like, will that person be an asset to the company, right? And is that the type of values that we want to have and enhance the company? And so I think the future of video and the future of all this is to just start and to really get out there, because otherwise your competitor, who may not even be as good as you, if they're doing it, they're going to end up drowning out your message, or they'll just be out there so much more than you that it'll be a catch-up game. And so I think it's now more important than ever to get out there digitally and share your voice and be authentic about it.
Awesome. Yeah, this is we're winding down, but I, for one, could talk about.
Did I motivate you to get online?
Absolutely. Me,
I'm expecting a video from all of you next Monday.
That's right. The theme of the week: going forward with courage. No, this is good stuff, Fanny. This is really important and impactful for the time, right now, and how we are choosing to show up in the world today is going to be so pivotal for the world, for the days to come and the years to come.
Yeah.
So I'm totally with you on mastering your own story, right?
Yeah.
We are our own heroes on our own journey, right?
Yes.
It's just a matter of, those figure out how to communicate that, and there's those who don't. So
And if I could just add one little point with branding and social media, I strongly believe it's not about being popular. It's not about going viral. It's not about getting the most views. It's about serving somebody, and whatever your message is that day, to know that there's somebody out there that will hear it and it will resonate with them and it will help them in some small way. And I think when we are driven by that goal of service, then every day's a win, right? And people will see through that, right? People will always see through the ones that are just there to be popular and the ones that are there to serve. And I think if we double down, triple down, quadruple down on the service side, we'll always be winners. And there is no bad content coming out of that.
I'm glad you underscored that, because I think there's this emphasis of eyeballs, which, in the grand scheme of business development, that of course, the more people see it, the higher probability of
ROI.
Exactly. But I think, as you have validated, it's the quality of the content, and as Javier has brought up, the cadence of it, that it's critical. And I often hear too many times, well, do you want to increase your viewership or your likes? And that's not necessarily that should not necessarily be your goal in doing this, and be able to give back and be more servant leadership, if you will. That kind of mentality, I think, is would bode well for anyone trying to get into video.
And it won't mess with your mind as much too, because
Exactly.
then you're just following numbers, and there's no end to that in your head, right? Whereas, hey, by doing this, I hope I help somebody today, and that's very rewarding in itself.
Exactly.
There it is. That is it. Hey, we want to thank you, Fanny. We have this has been awesome. I mean, this is just a very timely and a very impactful conversation. I want to thank you for your time and for all of this marvelous information that you have bestowed upon us today. This has been very helpful.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. It's super fun.
Oh, well, the fun has not stopped.
Okay. There's more to come.
We're going to transform our fun. So we're going into a aspect of the show where we call our rapid, what is this? Are this rapid fire or dope questions?
Rapid fire questions. So just kind of give the audience the opportunity to learn a little bit more about Fanny. And before we get into the questions, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Oh, I live and breathe LinkedIn. So find me on LinkedIn, Fanny Dunagan, FANNY I'm the only Asian with the Irish last name. I married a Dunagan. Right?
That's how I remember you. All right. 5 quick questions. All right. You ready?
Sure. Go.
Beach or mountains?
Oh, beach.
Summer or winter?
Summer.
All right. You're a big plane buff, right?
Yes.
F-22 or F-35, and why?
Oh, 35. Because for the longest time, my husband worked for Lockheed. So it was our bread and butter for a while.
Understandable. Halloween or Christmas?
Oh, Christmas. Always.
That had to be mine. And then most importantly, barbecue or tacos?
Oh, tacos. Tacos.
All right.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. Well,
that says a lot. Go ahead, Rambi.
We want to thank you for coming by. Now we're getting into our dope recommendations. So mine is, it can be a quote, a book, or a movie, or all three if you feel the need to give all three. But mine this week is from the great Jay-Z, Sean Carter. I'm not a businessman, I'm the businessman. And I believe that when it comes to branding yourself, you have to look at it like you're the business and not being a businessman. Right? So that's my dope quote for today. Who's next? Javier?
Yeah, I'll take that. Man, you can make me want to go after Jay-Z. That's a hard act to follow.
You got to wrap it to your next one.
So sorry.
You've got to wrap it.
Freestyle off the top of the dome.
Yes, sir.
Okay. No, we'll pass on that. So I got a book, and so what we're talking about is it's just so important for the time that we're in and for where we're headed. And the name of this book is called Dignity, and it's written by Dr. Donna Hicks. And if you find it, get the audio version. I'm a big audio book version fan these days. So, but the topic and the subject matter is very, very important. If you're gonna put yourself out there and you're going to expand your brand and impact the world with your voice and your hero's journey, do it with dignity.
I like that.
Beautiful.
Mine was actually kind of inspired by Fanny, our initial conversation a couple of years ago of just doing it scared and just get after it. And this is a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. You don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step. I think that's applicable for a lot of things, but in this case, what we're talking about today is just taking that first step, record that first video, speak your mind, be authentic. And it takes a lot of bravery and courage and humility to do that. So that really resonates with me. So that's mine.
Awesome. Well, I have a quote for you all. I first heard this quote actually from Brene Brown, which is, if you haven't seen her TED Talk, y'all need to, The Power of Vulnerability. But she actually got it from Theodore Roosevelt. I don't know if you guys have heard this, the man in the arena. Right? It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And Brene Brown always points to that quote and says, you know, especially for those that are afraid of the critics, right? You don't get to criticize me unless you're in the arena with me. So,
Absolutely.
Brene Brown, braving the wilderness. Yes, sir.
That one gets a dope applause.
It just gives me goosebumps every time.
Deep thoughts of Fanny Dunagan. That's awesome. Well, Fanny, thank you again today. Thanks for joining us today. Stay in touch with us. Make sure that you let us know. For those
You'll have to come to my show, my LinkedIn Live show.
Yep.
Okay, it's done. We'll send you a date.
Well, thanks for joining us today. Tune in next time for another episode of The Dope Experience. I'm Sal Vergara with Robbie Bryant and Javier Collins. Now go be dope and give hope. We'll see you all next time. Take care. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Dope Experience. Our hope is that you're left with a new perspective to formulate a blueprint of growth and transformation. Make sure you subscribe to us on Spotify or wherever you consume podcasts. Stay dope.